All right, let's get right into it. We are going way, way back to the very beginning of what we call history. We're talking about a civilization that pretty much wrote the rule book for our own, yet they remain one of the biggest puzzles in archaeology. We're talking about the Sumerians.
I mean, just think about it. The idea of a 60-minute hour, the 360 degrees in a circle, the first legal codes, the wheel, the first epic stories, all of it. You can trace it all back to them. The Sumerians weren't just some ancient culture. They were, for all intents and purposes, the first civilization.
And that, right there, is the million-dollar question. For all the incredible things they left behind, we have no idea where they came from. They just seem to show up in Mesopotamia around 3100 BCE, almost out of thin air, with their culture already up and running. Now, this isn't just a casual mystery. It's a real, formal, academic debate. They call it the Sumerian problem. And today, we're going to be historical detectives. We're going to look at the two biggest clues they left behind and see if we can get any closer to an answer. So, our first clue is maybe the weirdest one of all. It's not a pot or a building. It's the very words they spoke. Let's talk about the absolute enigma of the Sumerian language. That first point right there is the real jaw-dropper. Think about it. English is related to German, French is related to Spanish. Pretty much every language has cousins, a family tree. But not Sumerian. Nope, it is a total orphan. No known relatives, living or dead. For a little while, people thought, well, maybe it was built on top of an even older language, but that theory's pretty much been debunked. This language is completely on its own, which is a massive, massive clue that the Sumerians themselves were, well, different. There's a technical term for this, a linguistic isolate. It's basically the language equivalent of finding an animal with no evolutionary ancestors. It makes trying to figure out where the Sumerian people came from based on how they talked, well, pretty much impossible. It's a clue that just makes the mystery even deeper. Okay, let's move on to our second big clue. And honestly, this one is a game changer for the entire human race, the invention of writing itself. Writing didn't just pop into existence one day. It was a slow, very practical evolution. First, they used these simple little clay tokens to keep track of stuff, sheep, grain, whatever. Then, someone had the bright idea to just draw pictures of the tokens on clay tablets. Over hundreds of years, those pictures got simpler, more abstract, until they started representing sounds, not just things. And that system, cuneiform, would end up running the ancient world for more than 3,000 years. And this shows that origin story perfectly. On the left, you've got a little clay token. Maybe it stands for one sheep. On the right, you see one of the earliest tablets ever found. You know what it is? It's a land sale. So the first words ever written weren't grand poems or sacred texts. They were spreadsheets and receipts. It was all about keeping the books straight. Now this is where it gets really cool. This chart shows you that evolution in action. Take a look at that top row for star. Over 2,000 years, the drawing gets way more abstract, sure, but look at the meaning. It also came to mean God or sky. This isn't just about learning to draw faster. This is the birth of recorded abstract thought, a total revolution for the human mind. So how did they get that distinctive wedge-shaped look we all recognize? Well, a couple of things happened. First, the scribes realized if they wrote vertically, they'd smudge the wet clay with their hand. So they started writing horizontally, which meant turning all the pictures on their side. Then they started using a new stylus made from a reed that made these sharp, wedge-shaped marks instead of just scratching lines. And that's literally where the name comes from. Cuneiform is just Latin for wedge-shaped. It's a name that describes how they wrote, not what they were writing. And this system was so flexible, so useful that tons of other cultures, like the Akkadians and the Babylonians, borrowed it to write their own totally different languages. Okay, let's take a breath. We've got our two main clues, a language with no family and a writing system that changed the world. So let's see how these clues fit into the two big theories about who the Sumerians actually were. So here's the debate. The indigenous theory says, look, they were locals all along, and they developed writing right there in Mesopotamia, which totally fits with that slow, step-by-step evolution from tokens to tablets. But then you have the migrant theory, which argues that they must have come from somewhere else, bringing their bizarre, isolated language with them. That would explain why their language has no relatives in the area. And here's the kicker. After more than 100 years of digging and arguing,
That simple sentence is still true. The evidence points in two different directions. Their unique language screams migrant theory. They had to have brought it from somewhere else. But the slow local development of writing seems to perfectly support the indigenous theory. The clues contradict each other, and that's why the debate still rages on.
So where does all this leave us? Well, it leaves us staring at one of history's most fascinating and long-lasting mysteries.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it. The Sumerians basically gave us the blueprint for civilization. They built the first cities, they wrote the first laws, they were the first to really map the stars. We live in a world that is profoundly, deeply shaped by them. And yet, the people themselves, who they were, where they came from, are still a complete mystery.
And that's really the thought I want to leave you with. The invention of writing is the line we draw between prehistory and history. So if the very beginning of our own recorded story is this big of a puzzle, it just makes you wonder, what other huge secrets are still buried out there, waiting for us to find them? And on that thought, I just want to say thank you so much for joining our deep dive into the Sumerian problem today.
If you enjoyed playing historical detective with us and maybe learned something new, do us a favor and hit that like button. And definitely subscribe. Oh, and ring that little notification bell so you don't miss out on the next big mystery we tackle. And of course, please share this with anyone you think would find it as fascinating as we do. It really does help the channel out. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.